And your name is?
Bond. James Bond.
That's right, because your Geek History lesson on James Bond, the Sean Connery films, is now in session. Hello and welcome to Geek History Lesson. I'm Ashley Victoria Robinson.
And I'm Jason, a martini shaken, not stirred Inman. Welcome to Geek History Lesson, the podcast where we take one character, construct, or series of films and teach it to you in a little bit less than an hour. And today, we're going to be talking about one of my favorite things ever. Mr. Bond. Mr. James Bond, the world's greatest bird lover, actually portrayed Sean Connery in a series of films that we are going to be talking about today because, actually, I don't know if you know this, but a little James Bond film called No Time to Die was supposed to be coming out later this week.
Yeah.
And then Events of the World, let's not get too much into them, but Events of the World...
it got moved. It got moved.
Yeah, it got pushed back, like sometimes films do, and apparently there's now plenty of time to die. He's got lots of time to die, actually.
He's died like 3 or 4 times.
He's died, I think, probably almost in every movie. So we were planning to do a whole series of James Bond. We were going to give you like a James Bond month because I don't know if you guys know this. James Bond is one of my favorite things ever. And instead of giving you that all to you now, since they delayed the film, we're going to give you a little taste and then give you the rest a little bit later.
I will say, too, that this is something that the patrons actually helped us come to a decision on because we do share our topics with the patrons early, so they kind of know in advance what's going to happen. And we mentioned that we were going to be rejiggering some stuff with the moving of Bond, and they said, put it out anyway.
Yeah,
so
put it out anyway.
We did a happy medium.
Well, we have I think there is a really great discussion episode about James Bond that will happen later in this year.
Yeah.
And that's the one that we really want to save for the week that the movie comes out. But these Sean Connery films aren't going anywhere. And Sean Connery starred in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, only 6 films, everyone.
Still more than Daniel Craig.
Yes, that's
Still
true.
more than Pierce Brosnan.
Some people out there might be talking about that. Hey, are you going to talk about Never Say Never Again?
Nope.
And we're absolutely not, because to me, it's not canon, and it's not part
haven't seen it.
of the Eon films. And Sean Connery was definitely too old to play that part. But anyways, we're going to move past that. So this is going to be a very loose discussion of the Sean Connery James Bond films. Again, my favorite films. Bunch of my favorite films are in this bunch. That's not a sentence.
Okay.
Let's keep moving on. Ashley, take us down the road. What are we doing here?
I do want to say at the time of this recording, too, if people are unfamiliar with these movies.
Yes.
Because I hadn't watched any Sean Connery Bond all the way through.
And now you've watched all of them.
Now I've watched all of them.
All 6 films.
I even watched Thunderball, which is really great, except for the boring parts.
We'll get to that.
But they are streaming. They're very accessible, and they're streaming for free if you have the Pluto TV app.
They are
not
on Pluto TV.
Not a sponsor, but just an app and a resource that I really like. So if people want to play along at home, check that out.
So we're going to talk about each of these, but just in case right now you want to write down this list, the Sean Connery films are Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, and Diamonds Are Forever. Amazing titles.
Can you say Diamonds Are Forever properly?
Diamonds are forever, forever, forever.
That's inside the Jawiin HQ joke. Only for me.
So yes, it's funny. This episode only happened because James Bond is a big fan of James Bond. Ashley is a big fan of the Daniel Craig James Bond films. And
Yes.
when we knew this movie was going to be coming out, I said to Ashley, hey, would you like to do sort of a curated rewatch of the James Bond films? And to my shocking surprise, Ashley had not seen any of the Sean Connery movies besides...
I'd seen most of Goldfinger.
Because I had showed it to you.
Yep.
Yes. Ashley had not seen most of these, and now we are making our way through the James Bond film. So, Ashley, let's talk about this. Let's move on. Let's talk about James Bond, the Sean Connery era, the beginning of James Bond, at least in the movies.
Yes. So I wanted to ask something because in preparation for this episode, I did a lot of research. I read a lot of really interesting articles and sort of reflections on this era of James Bond, but also on this era of pop culture and kind of maybe why James Bond popped the way it did. And somebody who was watching these movies when they were first coming out as a child stated that throughout the 1960s and 70s, James Bond was the, quote, superhero movies.
That's a very fair
of
point.
The time. Obviously, Jason and I cannot speak to that, but we're going to go with the assumption that that is true. And I was wondering, what part in that do you think Sean Connery's casting as James Bond played? Because you could argue that the MCU only took off because Robert Downey Jr. is so good and so charming as Iron Man. Because that first phase is... it's a little touch and go sometimes. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of the reason that we love James Bond, even if you haven't seen the Connery films, is in his casting. And I know he's one of your favorite James Bonds.
Well, I want to back up a little bit because we should give mad props here to Mr. Ian Fleming, the author of James Bond, the creator of James Bond. And we first should say that these movies only happened because the James Bond novels were actually popular.
They were hugely popular.
They were really popular. In fact, the reason why From Russia with Love is the second James Bond film and why it breaks the order of the James Bond series, even though Casino Royale is actually the first, is that President John F. Kennedy said that From Russia with Love was his favorite novel of 1961.
It's a good novel.
So the producers immediately greenlit the production. So James Bond, before these movies, was very much in the lexicon. Your question is, how much do I think Sean Connery has to do with the success of James Bond?
With why it was popular, yeah.
I'm going to say a lot. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say at least 75%.
Cool.
Because...
obviously, mad props to casting for picking him. But...
well, I'm going to say this too. Every James Bond movie lives or dies with its Bond. Mm-hmm. It's a role akin to the Doctor from Doctor Who. Mm-hmm. Depending on the actor, those episodes can be great. Those episodes can be bad. And everybody also has their favorite Bond. Everybody has their first Bond. It's interesting because James Bond is now a multi-generational franchise.
Yes.
It is insane. But it's also a franchise that everybody knows.
And everyone has, I will say this based on the tweets that I've put out of our rewatch, everyone has very strong opinions about James Bond.
Yes.
And who is a good James Bond and who is not a good James Bond.
Yeah, and like which ones are the best and which ones suck and which ones are terrible and which ones are good. It's interesting because when you think about the casting, the first pick for the casting of James Bond was actually Cary Grant.
Can you imagine?
Yeah, Broccoli and Saltzman, the producers that produced the James Bond series, originally wanted Cary Grant. Another person that turned it down is Patrick McGoohan, very famous actor that I love from The Prisoner, but he turned it down because, he was already playing a spy on Danger Man. They also reached out to David Niven, who would later go on to play Bond in the 1967 parody Casino Royale.
He's more of a comedy guy, though, than a drama. And
then also, we have to talk about this person before they finally went to 32-year-old Sean Connery. They asked Roger Moore, because Roger Moore was the star of The Saint.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we would get to him eventually.
Yes. So it's interesting that they went through all these other people until they finally went with
Sean
Bond.
Connery.
Yes. So I think it's hugely important. Since you have seen these movies for the very first time, what do you think? How much do you credit Sean Connery with making this franchise a thing?
I would say the only reason that we like James Bond is because of Sean Connery.
Oh, interesting. Elaborate more on that.
I know we're going to talk a little bit later about sort of, maybe we can talk about it now, how much he does not stack up to literary Bond.
No, not at all.
There is another actor who I think is much closer to on the page Bond, and that's definitely not Sean Connery. But when you watch these movies, they do have a nice timeless quality to them. Until you get into some of the technology and some of
the gadgets,
some of the exoticism of different races and locales, which we sort of can't escape talking about, but is a reflection of the time, and that's okay. But Sean Connery feels modern. The performance, for the most part, when he's not
pretty good.
When he's not slapping girls on the butt and saying man talk, he does feel like a modern actor. Whereas a lot of the other actors who are doing their jobs well feel like actors from the 60s or 70s. Whereas Sean Connery feels like he could be an actor now. And I think that just speaks to his talent. And I think that is 100% the reason why we like it. And I think Especially, I think up until about You Only Live Twice, so maybe not for Diamonds Are Forever.
Diamonds are forever.
But you can tell that Sean Connery is having a lot of fun.
Oh, he loves it.
And that's something that you look for in Bond, right? Like, you look for Bond to be pleased with himself.
Bond is cheeky.
Bond makes jokes. Yes. And I believe that James Bond should tell jokes, but I believe that some actors who've played James Bond can't deliver jokes. Mm-hmm. And I just think it's his energy, which I think is probably kind of what he would have been like at the time. I don't know if he's putting on much of a character or if he's just being Sean Connery, but I think... I'm going to say this, and I don't think Roger Moore is a bad Bond. I think Roger Moore has great moments. I think he even has a couple great movies, including Man with the Golden Gun, which stars the man who inspired James Bond as the villain,
Christopher Lee.
Yeah, but I think if
Spy Love Me is great too. But I don't want to be honest.
But I think if Roger Moore had been the OG first James Bond,
sure,
I don't think the franchise would have lasted past the 70s.
Yeah. I don't really want to be honest with you. I don't want to really get into a conversation of comparing the Bonds, although that is what everybody wants to do.
It's a bit of an inevitability.
Yeah. You know? They're all great.
Yeah, they're all great at different things, which has been the coolest thing about rewatching it. Mm-hmm. So that is a very long way to say I think the only reason we like James Bond is because of Sean Connery. And one of my favorite things that Sean Connery does, and it's just because of the way that stunts were at the time, is he just punches a lot of guys in the head.
He does.
And that's a quality that I love Daniel Craig's Bond. Having now seen the Sean Connery, Daniel Craig borrows a lot from Sean Connery. And the writing also, you can tell, is trying to be reflective of this era. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
I like that he punches people in the head.
Oh, yeah. He busts his fist up. Because I don't care.
Yeah. Do you think James Bond would have worked without him if they had cast, we don't even have to say Roger Moore, but if they had cast Cary Grant, who's fabulous, but to me is like not Bond at all.
You know, it's interesting. There's a whole bunch of other actors that I didn't even name that were considered. Apparently,
I'm sure they ran the gamut on
They went through everybody in this thing.
Just like when he cast the Superman or Batman.
I really don't think Cary Grant would have worked.
I don't think so either.
I don't think David Niven would have worked.
No. Too goofy.
I'll tell you this. I do think Patrick McGoohan might have worked.
Interesting.
But the problem is that Patrick McGoohan is such a serious actor that I think he would have only done 2 movies and then bounced.
They'd be like, I don't want to be in these weird B movies, because even though these were popular, they were kind of considered
schlocky.
B movies.
Very schlocky, very silly. They were supposed to be like just silly, dumb fun.
Which is funny because I don't think these ones are.
Silly, dumb fun?
I don't.
Oh, no, they get much goofier, yes.
Yeah, but I think the interesting thing about these early ones up until Goldfinger is they're really much closer to like a John le Carré spy novel.
Yes.
Than like a goofy action movie.
And we'll get into that as we talk about each one. Do you have any other questions before you want to just talk about each movie?
No, we can go ahead and talk about the movies.
Well, do you have I know we wanted to talk about a little bit, but maybe before we get into the movies, about the differences between film Bond and book Bond.
Yes.
Now, Ashley, have you read the James Bond books?
I think I've read all of them.
All the Ian Fleming ones?
Yes. I read when Casino Royale, when the Daniel Craig movie started, I went and read them all.
I don't remember the exact number, everyone, so, back off.
Wait, is Moonraker a book? Because I definitely didn't read Moonraker.
I don't think so.
Because I was like, I'm not going to space.
No, I don't know.
Anyways,
it doesn't matter because this is not Wikipedia, the podcast.
Yeah.
Go look it up yourself. This is, I think there's about 12. So what would you say are the main differences between book Bond and movie Bond? Because I think there are some very big differences.
Book Bond is very serious. Mm-hmm. Book Bond doesn't make jokes.
No.
The way that movie Bond makes jokes.
Mm-hmm.
And book Bond is a little more dispassionate in his treatment of other characters, even like Felix Leiter. And that's a relationship that I'm really interested in. And that's something that I think the modern movies do the best job at. Even though I think there's a lot more to mine with Felix than we ever have. Or with his treatment of the women, he's a lot colder than he is in the movies. And I would say he's kind of a dick. Now, movie Bond is a dick, but in a different way.
Well, Book Bond is very cold. He's very callous. He's very unlikable. Book Bond is misogynistic.
Well, the book was written in the 50s.
And he's a straight up alcoholic.
I mean, movie Bond is a straight up Daniel Craig's Bond is an alcoholic.
But Book Bond is sent, like, they tell you he's an alcoholic.
Oh, yes.
Also, Book Bond doesn't like his job.
Yeah, but does movie Bond like his job?
Yes. Movie Bond loves the power and the places it allows him to travel.
Maybe.
Movie Bond loves to travel. Like, he loves getting the mission. It's his thing. He doesn't like not being on a mission. That's movie
fair,
Bond.
Yeah.
But Book Bond is very much like,
Book Bond is tired. Yeah.
It's interesting because I actually think that Sean Connery is like Book Bond in his first two movies. In Dr. No
fair.
And From Russia with Love. I think it's Goldfinger is where he creates the gentleman spy Bond that is carried on forever. And I think that's the real divergence of the two.
Well, that's why I think that's also why Goldfinger is still lauded as one of, if not the best Bond movie.
Oh, yes. All right, so let's start talking about these movies. Here's a quick overhead of Dr. No. It was directed by Terrence Young. It was produced by Harry Saltzman and Aubrey Broccoli. That'll be the last time I say their names because they produce everything. The screenplay was by Richard Maybaum, Johanna Harwood, and Berkeley Mather. It's based on Dr. No by Ian Fleming. And, of course, the music is by Monty Norman. And it came out in October of 1962. Here's the fun fact of this. The budget of Dr. No was $1.1 million and it made $59 million.
So is there any wonder they made 150 more of them?
Now, this is the movie that is set in Jamaica. It has Dr. No, which is a very famous villain. I think an underrated James Bond villain is Dr. No.
I think this is an underrated James Bond movie.
I agree.
Now, full disclosure, this movie has a lot of Chinese characters in it, played by white people, and that's just a reflection of the time. I don't think it was meant to be hateful and discriminatory in that way. I think that was the way the industry was, but I think if we didn't acknowledge that, it'd be foolhardy.
Yes, this is also the movie that introduces Felix Leiter, played by, I think, one of the better actors that play Felix Leiter, Jack Lord, who is, of course, goes on to become very famous in Hawaii Five-0. This also has one of the best Bond girls ever, Honey Rider, dressed in the classic white bikini that is homaged across several Bond films. Played
by Ursula Anders. She always appears near the top of, like, best Bond girl.
Oh, yeah, it's a look at. And then also, this is the movie that introduces Spectre. Do you know what Spectre stands for? It's ridiculous.
Special people eating cheese together really exclusively.
Incorrect. It is the Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, and Extortion.
That acronym doesn't work.
The SP is used for special. It's ridiculous.
Yes.
Spectre's a cool name. It doesn't need to be an anagram.
When we were watching this movie, Jason informed me that Honey Rider wearing a bikini contributed to an upswing in the sales of bikinis.
It did. It did. Okay, so I want you to talk about, like, a little bit, Ashley. You said that you were surprised by how fully formed James Bond was in his very first film appearance.
Yeah, this movie has a lot of the things that I think of for a Bond movie. It has MI6. It has Bond. Bond is in the suit. It has M, who's kind of giving him a dressing down before he's sending him on the mission. So, like, we've already established that, like, yes, Bond is good at his job, but he's a bit of a liability. He's a bit of a troublemaker. It has an exotic locale to travel to. Mm-hmm. It has a villain with a goofy costume and a speech. It has Bond being captured and speechified at. It has a Bond girl. The Bond girl actually gets to be kind of capable. It has Felix Leiter in it. Like, if you were making a checklist of things that need to appear in a Bond movie, the only things that we're really missing out on here are the Aston Martin, and Q.
Well, Q is in this movie.
But not as fully and completely realized as he'll become later.
Q is in this movie, but Q is played by a different actor.
Yeah.
He's played by Peter Burton. This is Burton's only appearance as Q until he's replaced by Desmond Llewellyn in the very next movie.
National treasure. Icon.
Yes. Desmond Llewellyn, who's one of the greatest actors of all time. Throwing it out there. I don't care what you think. Anyways, Ashley, there's interesting because a lot of this is just... the opening of the movie is that the British agents in Jamaica turn on their radio, never finish the message, and London's like, go check on him, Bond. Mm-hmm. And that's the movie.
Yeah.
And then Bond goes there and he finds that there's a secret island with a fake Asian man on it.
Yeah.
Who wants to blow up the moon.
Yeah.
Well, he doesn't want to blow up the moon, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's literally the movie.
Yeah.
It
sounds like a James Bond movie to me.
It's a very James Bond movie. It is, it is very...
we can make the jokes about the radio and the tech all we want.
Yeah.
But for the time, I mean, that's the only way they would have had to check in with each other. So if you didn't check in by radio, that probably would have raised...
Yeah.
a high alert.
All right.
But I mean, yes, compared to later movies,
yes.
Is it simple? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But watching it, like the elaborate sets, the costume pieces, the lighting this movie is shot.
It's very well shot.
It's a beautiful movie.
Dr. No really holds up.
Me too. I was shocked at how much I liked it.
For a movie that came out in 1961.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it really holds up. Now, do you want to jump into the next one, or are there any other Bondy and Sean Connery conversations you would like to have, Ashley?
Well, okay. So Sean Connery comes into this pretty fully formed.
Yep.
And I mentioned earlier that I think that Daniel Craig lifts a lot of things from this. So I guess what are some Sean Connery affectations that we think other Bonds have stolen? Or what are things that Sean Connery did that became a staple for Bond?
That's tough.
So Sean Connery does this thing where whenever he has to answer yes, he doesn't just say yes. He goes, yes. Before he speaks. And Daniel Craig does that exactly in every single one of his deliveries. And I think that's so interesting.
I'll tell you one that I think a lot of other actors have stolen is that Sean Connery is always very still.
Yes.
And he's very planted.
That is something that I notice in later movies especially when he's playing against like a younger woman who has a lot of kind of nervous energy, and he's a huge man.
Yes.
Like he's a big dude. And he is very still, yes.
Yeah, he's very still. I will say that Sean Connery does this thing with his eyebrows.
Yes.
When he's intrigued, that I've seen lots of other Bonds. Roger Moore definitely steals it.
He also smirks a lot when he's like pleased with himself, when things are going his way. And a lot of Bonds, even Timothy Dalton steals that.
Well, it's interesting because Sean Connery's Bond a lot of times will smile when the villain gets one up on him.
Like he's impressed?
Or like he's impressed, or he's like, oh, you got me.
Yeah,
like a little bit of that. Like he kind of like Bond loves a good and worthy opponent.
Yes.
Bond doesn't want a pushover.
No.
So, yeah.
Well, just wait, Pierce. We got lots of pushovers coming.
Whoa, easy there. Easy. All right, so let's move into From Russia with Love. It is a 1963 film. It was directed by Terrence Young, produced by, of course, the same people. Screenplay Richard Maybaum, same ones, and Berkeley Mather. Story by Johanna Harwood. She does not get script credit. She only gets story credit, based on From Russia with Love by Ian Fleming. Music by John Barry, classic James Bond composer who goes on to compose actually the grand majority of this question. This movie came out in October of 1963, the second Bond movie to come out in October. These are winter movies. I think Bond movies for me are winter movies.
Well, now they certainly are.
Well, they try to make them blockbusters. So basically, this is about James Bond going to assist in the defection of a Soviet consulate clerk, Tatiana Romanov, in Turkey, where Spectre plans to avenge Bond's killing of Dr. No. I'm going to say this right now. I think the teaser From Russia with Love is one of the best Bond teasers ever.
This movie is in my top 5 James Bond movies.
Oh, easily.
I love this movie.
Because Robert Shaw, the amazing man who goes on to later play Quinn in Jaws, is the villain in this movie. And the opening scene of this movie is him training to kill James Bond. And we see Sean Connery and we see him choke the man out. And we think he just killed Sean Connery, and it's actually somebody with a face mask.
Yes, which looks a little silly, but when you consider it for the time, is kind of a really cool move. I love all the Russian ladies in this.
Yes.
This actually, even compared to Goldfinger, which is the next movie, treats the female characters with more power and agency.
Very fair, yeah.
Which is something that I both love and respect.
Well, we also talk about that this film marked the debut of Desmond Llewellyn as Q, a role that he would play
so much.
for 36 years and 17 films until The World Is Not Enough in 1999.
I forgot to mention it, and I can't remember
Grow
if
up,
she
007.
appears in Dr. No. Does Moneypenny debut in Dr. No?
Yes, Lois Maxwell, who played Miss Moneypenny, does appear in Dr. No.
Iconic Canadian actress. By the way, Jason and I read her Wikipedia recently.
She's quite impressive.
If you have never taken a deep dive on that woman's life.
Lois Maxwell.
What an icon.
Yeah.
Love her.
Yeah. And also we have to talk about M, of course, for a lot of movies played by Bernard Lee.
Yes, who is very much the grumpy old man M. But he's my favorite of the grumpy old man M's.
He's my favorite M. Of all of them.
Of all of them.
Of all of them. Look, a lot of people want to default to Judi Dench.
I love Judi Dench.
And I think that's a two-factor thing, and I'm going to say this. I think the reason why people default to Judi Dench is because, she's the most modern one. I mean, not now, but she was.
Yeah.
She was a famous actress before she got the part.
It is also cool to see an older woman putting James Bond in his place.
Sure, but also, I think it's because she's also the M with the most screen time.
That's fair. Like that's absolutely true.
There's a lot of movies where Bernard Lee gets one scene.
That's absolutely fair, and she has the most to do, and sometimes she goes in the field. That's a fair observation.
I think Bernard Lee is the perfect foil for the M for James Bond because, again, if you know, Sean Connery was not a refined gentleman. He was a poor boy from the middle of nowhere. And he became refined because of these movies. Primarily, a lot of that comes from the director of the next movie that we're going to talk about.
We will talk about that, yes.
And I think Bernard Lee plays the perfect upper crust man who doesn't like this spy or this young man who has climbed well above his station.
Yes. Well, no
Get
offense
over
to
it, 007.
our English listeners, because I do love England, but you want to talk about classism.
Yeah, totally right. So you talked about that there are a lot of great women in it. I want to talk about there's a great elder actress in this.
Lotte Lenya.
Is that who plays Rosa Klebb?
Yes.
Number 3.
I love her. Iconic.
She's really great.
I love her so much. She is so iconic that Austin Powers parodies her.
Yeah. She's the Frau Fabricina.
Yeah.
Yes.
I love her too because she looks so severe. Like she's a very striking, scary older woman.
And I think the reveal where you find out that she's the maid at the very end is such a good reveal. Is a really good reveal.
I also love that they fully let her fight Bond.
Yeah.
Twice.
Yeah. He has to be.
She's like a 50-year-old woman.
He has to hold her with the chair against the wall.
That's iconic. I love it so much. Yeah, she is. I love the beautiful younger Russian agent as well, but like she's maybe for me the best part of the movie.
We also have to talk about that in Istanbul. By the way, I give mad props to any Bond movie that is set in Istanbul. But when Bond meets the station head Ali Kerim Bey, great character for a Bond movie. Such a great character for the Bond movie, where he has all the sons that are like his agents that drive around the cars and they do the things.
Also, some questionable casting of some of the Turkish characters for the time as well.
Yes. But
I would love to see a modern Bond movie set in Turkey. I think that would be cool, and I think there's lots of.
I think Skyfall is in Turkey. Doesn't it start in Turkey? One of them goes through the marketplace in Istanbul.
That's Skyfall, yes. But they're not there for
very long.
Yeah.
No. But we also have to talk about Robert Shaw is such a great Bond villain. It's interesting because he's not the grand poobah. He's not the mastermind. He's actually the thug.
Yes.
And his fight with 007
is great.
In that tiny train space is really good.
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those things where Q gave us the little shoe with the knife, and you're like, oh, this is like, you didn't realize that was going to be the way he was going to win the fight.
But this is the thing about the gadgets. And Jason has a statement that some people think that Bond movies are all about gadgets, and
they're not.
We disagree with that statement. But Sean Connery era gadgets are like, here's a knife in your shoe. Here's a magnet in your briefcase. They're actually fairly useful things that a spy of that era could have had access to.
Yes, because
there's no invisible cards.
And I've said this point before, especially in our watch things. In our watch through, that some of the later Roger Moore / Pierce Brosnan gadgets are so specific, that you're like, where would you ever use that?
Except in the scene that they wrote 50 pages along, where you're going to have to use this.
Yeah, except for the scene where they're like, how can we solve this? Oh, what if he has a magnet in his shoe that like throws out a harpoon hook?
Yeah,
and you're like, Any other thoughts on From Russia with Love?
It's great.
From Russia with Love.
Let's talk about Goldfinger.
Goldfinger.
Ba, ba, ba. Shirley Bassey's an icon, by the way. We also, if you haven't seen her singing Goldfinger at the James Bond 50th celebration, as a woman in her 70s, she absolutely murders it.
Goldfinger is a 1964 spy film. It was directed by, I think, one of the best Bond directors of all time, Guy Hamilton.
What a great name.
Screenplay by Richard Maybaum, third Bond movie in a row. New screenplay credit by Paul Dern. Uncredited story by Johanna Harwood and Berkeley Mather. Of course, based on Goldfinger by Ian Fleming. It was released in September of 1964. It had a budget of $3 million and made $125 million.
Jesus. Absolute Christ.
It's one of the highest grossing Bond films.
Even for inflation, I believe it's still up there.
It is still up there. The film's plot has Bond investigating gold smuggling by gold magnate Ulrich Goldfinger and eventually uncovering Goldfinger's plans to contaminate the United States bullion depository at Fort Knox. Goldfinger is considered to be the first Bond blockbuster. And this one also is the first movie with what I think considered to be the greatest car of all time. The Aston Martin DB5. Also, the iconic image of the gold-painted Shirley Easton as the Jill Masterson character actually made it onto the cover of Life. And many of the elements introduced in this film, including the extensive use of technology and gadgets, would later be used in many other films. In 1999, the BFI, the British Film Institute, ranked it as number 70 in the top 100 British films.
It definitely deserves to be on that list, I would say. It also starts the unfortunate tradition of having women with offensive names.
Yes.
Which is too bad because she's a great character.
Can I say the name? It's a name.
It's a name, and yeah, you can say the name. It's fine.
Pusher galore.
Yeah, bummer. Real bummer.
Yep.
Because I love her so much. I love that she is age appropriate for James Bond. That's a nice change of pace.
Honor Blackman played Pussy Galore.
She is very striking. She's very capable. It's just really too bad about that their name.
So a funny thing about her name. The producers were concerned about the censors with her name. And the producers thought about changing the character's name to Kitty Galore. And then Guy Hamilton, decided, and I quote,
Kitty Galore I could have lived with, truly.
If you were a 10-year-old boy and knew what the name meant, you weren't a 10-year-old boy. You were a dirty little bitch.
Jesus.
Oh, Guy Hamilton.
I'm going to go out on a limb here, Mr. Hamilton. 10-year-old boys know what that word means.
Oh, boy. Oh, Guy Hamilton.
Hey, Guy Hamilton, thank you so much for your contributions to James Bond. Woo. You're a dick.
By the way,
dead, right?
I'm pretty certain he's dead.
He's like super dead.
I'm not certain. I think he is dead. But one thing we got to talk about is that I do know in the terms of the production of this movie that at this movie, Sean Connery was still very nervous in the role, and he was very nervous about being able to portray all this is the correct type of brandy, and this is the correct type of
we talked
and
about
this is the correct type of things. And Guy Hamilton is the director because Guy Hamilton was that gentleman. And Guy Hamilton kind of put Sean Connery through like a 2-week, come hang out with me, come have dinner with me. I'll take you to my tailor, we'll do all this stuff. And in fact, Sean Connery actually credits Guy Hamilton with being the first director to make him feel comfortable in playing the role of Bond.
Yeah, so if you ever wondered if Kingsman was real, It was between Guy Hamilton and Sean Connery.
It was Guy Hamilton. It was all of it.
And Goldfinger has that wonderful scene where they're talking about the type of brandy, and Bond gets one over on the bankers, and that was all at the behest of Guy Hamilton.
Ian Fleming visited the set of Goldfinger in April of 1964, and he died a few months later in August of 1964.
That's very sad, but it's kind of nice that he got to go on set for, again, maybe the most iconic James Bond movie.
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this movie a lot.
Okay.
This is one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yes.
I think this is not only... can I reveal it now? Should I save it? What do you think, Ashley?
I don't know what you're going to reveal, so...
Well, I'm going to reveal that I think this is the greatest James Bond film of all time.
Oh, sure. That's fine. Yeah, you could say that.
I think that everything that James Bond is comes from this film. And I also think this film is an amazing time machine to look back at 1964. And I know that sounds weird for a weird, schlocky...
action movie, but if you look at like the scenes in Miami and the scenes in Fort Knox and the scenes in Switzerland, you're getting this very unique view of 1964 because at this time, James Bond mostly shot where they were actually located. So they were actually in the Alps. Yeah.
They were actually in Kentucky. They were actually in Florida.
Ain't no we shooting in Atlanta and making it work.
Yeah, it's only like the interior sets and the close-ups they really did in Pinewood.
Yeah.
But everything else was basically on location. And because of that, I think a lot of times their cameras capture 1964 in a weird way that I think a lot of other movies that were released in 1964 don't.
Interesting.
I don't know what it is. I think maybe because the foreground is so absurd that they don't touch the background, whereas like other movies were trying to like make it so controlled and try to be thing and try to, and also at this time, especially for a lot of films, you didn't see location shooting a lot.
Yeah.
Which was also at the time a big selling factor of the James Bond movies.
It's also something that sets Star Wars apart.
Yes, exactly. And I do know for a good time, Guy Hamilton tried to convince the U.S. Army to let them shoot at Fort Knox.
Yeah.
And the Army was like, we're not letting you shoot here. Can
you imagine?
But
Jesus.
they did shoot at the barracks of Fort Knox.
Yeah.
No, they did. I could be wrong with that.
Well, because there's the scene where
all the Army soldiers
they all fall asleep, and those are all actual soldiers who I guarantee you were not paid.
No, they were just all extras, but they actually were real Army soldiers.
Extras get paid.
Yes. I'm trying to figure this out.
That's okay.
I'm not gonna. So interesting enough, the controller of the Fort Knox vault actually sent a letter to the producers complimenting them on their imaginative depiction of the vault. And United Artists actually received several letters of like, how could a British film inside Fort Knox?
They didn't.
Yeah, they didn't.
Movies.
Yeah. So they did not film on Fort Knox, but they filmed close.
There's an aerial shot that is actually Fort Knox.
Oh, okay. So they got to film in the area of Fort Knox thanks to Broccoli's friend, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Rushman. Interesting. The military apparently went absolutely aped, but several of the soldiers knew this was a James Bond film and were actually very excited to be in the film.
That's cute. I love that so much.
So Ashley, I love this film a lot.
Yes.
I think that not only this is the first James Bond movie that transcends being a James Bond movie. I think it transcends the schlock. I actually think it is a gorgeous looking movie. The cinematography is
beautiful,
off the chain. The score is amazing. Connery is fantastic. I think the woman who played Kitty Galore, Honor Blackman, is amazing. And I think the plot is not stupid. It's actually pretty smart that Goldfinger is like, I'm going to irradiate the gold instead of stealing the gold.
And again, so iconic that we have an entire Austin Powers movie that is parody of this.
Yes, exactly. Well, it's a little bit different, but yes, I understand
but
the title.
But they look very heavily,
yes.
And the gimmick.
Again, I just think it's tough for me to talk about this movie. What do you think of Goldfinger?
It's interesting because I love this movie a lot. But I also think that this movie is when it stops being spy. This is when James Bond stopped being spy movies.
Oh, okay.
And this is when they start being something closer to a tent pole, and we never get back to the intrigue and the running around in alleys that you get in like for Russia with Love
is very much a spy movie, yes.
I love. It's just what I like a lot. So it's an interesting turning point, and I think it opens doors for good and for ill.
Yes.
Because some of these things, like the gadgets most prominently, the villain with a gimmick, like really get taken too far.
They go too far.
But then, you know, when the balance is correct, it is so good. And I think another reason that this movie is particularly beloved is because it is set in America. And we like to see our homes and ourselves reflected. And this is a North American podcast, and
that was also intentional.
Yes,
because
of course
because
it was.
The producers, because they wanted to, they set the first two movies
abroad.
Yes, they want to do abroad and show England like different locations. This was the one to bring in the American audiences, and it worked. It did.
Yeah,
it did in a big way.
Yeah,
it's interesting because. This is one where you kind of forget that it takes place in America because you just see a horse ranch and then an army base.
I mean, not really. They're like in Miami in the opening.
That's true. That is very true.
Also, arguably has the most offensive treatment of a woman.
Oh, yes.
With Dink and Man Talk.
Yes, when Felix Leiter shows up in the very beginning in Miami, Mr. Connery, James Bond himself, says, Felix meet Dink, Dink meet Felix. Felix should goodbye to Dink. And she goes, huh? And he slaps her in the ass and goes, man talk.
Awful. It's like...
It is literally...
It's so offensive.
It might be the most misogynistic moment ever captured on film. I don't
think even by far. I think in James Bond it is.
Oh, yes.
I think there's other movies.
Well, sure.
I think everything Quentin Tarantino does is way more offensive than this.
That is a fair point. But I guess for me, I think the thing of man talk and the slap on the ass, you're just like
it is like hard to watch.
You know, I feel like
it's like trigger warning.
If you were to open up a dictionary and go to misogyny, I feel like the dictionary would play you this clip.
Yeah.
I love Goldfinger. In fact, I would love to do a whole episode of Goldfinger.
Great.
So.
Hashtag GHL Goldfinger, yes.
I'll happily wait to watch this a million times. Okay, so let's move into the next one. Thunderball, a 1965 film directed by Terrence Young, produced by Kevin McClory, screenplay by Richard Maybaum, still writing these, with other credit by John Hopkins and Jack Whittingham, story by Kevin McClory, Jack Whittingham, and Ian Fleming got story credit on this one as well, based on Thunderball by Ian Fleming, and the music again by John Barry.
This movie's really good, except for the boring parts. This movie also sets a weird precedent where there's so much underwater bullshit in James Bond.
Well, let's talk about the really quick synopsis of this. Is the film follows Bond's mission to find 2 NATO atomic bombs stolen by Spectre and holds the world ransom for $100 million in diamonds in exchange for not destroying an unspecified major city in either the United Kingdom or the United States. It's later revealed to be Miami. The search leads Bond to the Bahamas, where he encounters Emilio Largo, the card-playing eye-patch-wearing Spectre #2, backed by CIA agent Felix Leiter and Largo's mistress, Domino Duval.
I love her.
Bond's search culminates in an underwater battle with Largo's henchmen, and the film had a complex production with 4 different units, and 25% of this film takes place underwater. Now,
God, it's so boring.
This is the first Bond film to be shot in widescreen Panavision, and it's the first Bond film to have a running time of over 2 hours.
Setting a bad precedent for modern James Bond.
So to me, this is the film that Austin Powers parodies the most, because the opening of the film is number 2 with the eye patch, just like number 2 in Austin Powers, goes into the room, and we don't get to see the man's face. We just see a man in a gray suit petting a kitty, and then the man with the kitty, who we later find out is Blofeld, electrifies a culprit, which also happens in Austin Powers.
Austin Powers also lifts a lot aesthetically from On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Sure.
And then so does Inception.
And this is also the one with the shark scenes, which is a big Austin Powers joke as well. Like, to me, go ahead.
Can you tell the story about Connery and the shark scenes?
Oh, yes. So this was apparently the movie where Sean Connery became really turned off with playing James Bond.
Which, to be fair, happens to every actor who plays James Bond.
So there is a scene in this movie where Bond is in a swimming pool and they trap him because they put a little canopy over it. And there's only one hole out and they open the door and it's the hole to the sharks. The shark comes out and you see the shot. It is Sean Connery.
It sure
where the
is.
shark comes out and the only thing between him and the shark is this glass little door.
And you can see it.
Yes. And apparently Sean Connery was very bothered with that.
I would be.
With that stunt. And apparently, again, that is the stunt. Apparently, he says to this day, like, that is the thing where he was like, I'm out. I'm done. I am out of this.
This is also the Bond movie where you can spot his hairpiece.
Yes, this is the first time his hairpiece is starting to go out.
I mean, it's a pretty good piece, but you can spot it.
By the way, I want to give a mad shout out to another person that worked on this movie, Ted Moore, cinematographer of this movie.
This movie, for how boring it is, definitely needs to be lauded for what it did, technically.
Well, he is also the cinematographer for Dr. No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, Diamonds Are Forever, and Live and Let Die, and portions of The Man with the Golden Gun.
Wow.
So,
all the ones that look good.
Yeah, so Ted Moore, I think, is responsible for a lot of... it's tough because Thunderball is also the James Bond story that has been redone by James Bond 2 other times. Like, literally, Never Say Never Again is the exact same plotline of this movie. And I forget which Roger Moore has the exact same plotline of this movie as well.
Octopussy?
I cannot remember. I just said I don't remember it. But this one, I'm going to say this right now. I think this is the weakest Sean Connery film.
I think that's fair.
Even though I do not like Diamonds Are Forever.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. I think that this is the weakest Sean Connery film.
I think if you had seen this movie when it came out, it probably seemed like quite something. I just think it hasn't aged well.
Well, and
and all the parts that aren't boring, like I said, are pretty good. Domino's are really good, and her and Bond have a really interesting relationship, and she's super cute, and like all of that. So there's like 45 minutes of this movie that are really good.
Yes. Now, our old buddy Guy Hamilton was invited to direct, but he said that he had considered himself worn out and creatively drained by the production of Goldfinger.
All right, I think we can move on.
And that's what brought Terrence Young back, the director of the first two, back to this film. They just became obsessed with the underwater sequences. This also
even
starts
Chris
Bond's...
Brosnan is doing underwater stuff.
Well, this is the movie, I think, that started the underwater obsession for Bond.
Yes, for sure.
Where it just kept going on and on.
I mean, even Craig has an underwater sequence when they're in Venice in Casino Royale, and he's trying to get Vesper out of the elevator. He's swimming around.
Now we're going to move on to You Only Live Twice.
This movie is...
Or so it seems.
Upsetting.
One life for yourself and one for your dreams.
Sung by
Nancy Sinatra.
Iconic.
This is a 1967 spy film directed by Louis Gilbert, new director here. Screenplay by Roald Dahl.
What?
Writer of what other famous works, Ashley?
Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, The Big Friendly Giant,
James and the Giant
Matilda?
Peach. Yeah. Story by Harold Jack Bloom, based on You Only Live Twice by Ian Fleming. Music by John Barry again. Cinematography by Freddie Young, new cinematographer for the very first time. This is the first Bond film released in summer. This was released in June of 1967. Its budget was $8 million and made $111. In the film, Bond is dispatched to Japan after American and Soviet manned spacecraft disappear mysteriously in orbit. With each nation blaming the other amidst the Cold War, Bond travels secretly to a remote Japanese island to find the perpetrators and come face to face with Ernst Stavro Blofeld, the head of Spectre. The film reveals the appearance of Blofeld for the very first time, and Spectre is working for a government of an unnamed Asian power implied to be China, but never said to be China, to provoke a war between the superpowers. Most of the filming happened in Japan, and it was announced before this movie was released that this would be Sean Connery's final film as Bond.
So this movie is so interesting to me because it almost does a good thing. So in Dr. No, we have no less than 3 Asian characters played by white people.
Yes.
And in You Only Live Twice, we have a whole bevy of Asian characters.
With the exception of the head of the MI6 unit in Japan.
Yes, played by Asian and Asian American actors.
Tiger Tanaka.
And who are really good. Like Tiger's rad. And then we put Bond in Asian face.
Yes.
And it's, first of all, it's a bad makeup job. And then, again, you can make certain allowances based on the time period. But for me, while I enjoy this movie, I would never put this in like a top 5 list.
See, now I would, because I actually think this one does a really good job of giving Sean Connery a send-off.
Yes.
Especially with the teaser where he dies.
Yeah,
I think that's
it's cool.
I think that's really good. Also, again, up to this point, you have to think about it. This is the 5th Bond movie at this point. Yes? Yeah, 5th.
Yeah.
And this is the first one to basically just stay in one place. It's in Japan the entire time. Now, there is some funny stuff that I want to talk about in terms of the writing of this. So Roald Dahl is actually a close friend of Ian Fleming.
Interesting.
And he actually had no previous experience in writing a screenplay. And the reason why they gave it to him is because Richard Maybaum, the guy who's written all the other ones, was unavailable. Now, Dahl has said, and I quote, that You Only Live Twice is Fleming's worst book with no plot in it with which you could make a movie. And he said that he had to create a brand new plot.
I mean, he's kind of right.
Yes. And he said that throughout most of the script, he had no idea what the hell he was going to do with Bond. And he had to write this script in 6 weeks.
Well, he did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I've
seen movies they wrote in 6 weeks that are a lot worse than this.
He said the ideas for this movie came from him when he decided to basically do this basic plot structure of Dr. No.
Yeah. This is much closer to Dr. No.
Yes, and he was basically given free reign with the script, except for the character of Bond and the girl formula, the producers told him, which had to have involving 3 women for Bond to seduce, an ally and a henchwoman who both get killed, and then there's the main Bond girl.
I do think when like his wife gets killed, the girl he marries, I think that's kind of sad.
Contessa? We're not going to be talking about that, Ashley.
No, the Japanese girl who he gets married to in that weird ceremony.
Oh, yes. And that fake ceremony.
I think when she dies, I think that's sad.
So I actually like
Contessa, Jesus.
I love the Contessa.
I mean, I do too, but she's not in this.
I like a lot of this because, like, for a movie that came out in 1967, you got to think about the moon landings in 1969. So this movie is
what does that have to do with
well,
this
because
at all?
this movie is about capturing spacecraft in orbit.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I guess.
So to be honest with you, I think interestingly enough, which in 1967 there are spacecraft in orbit.
Yeah, there's lots of stuff up there.
So I think that's very interesting. It's almost like forward thinking for a James Bond movie, and most James Bond movies nowadays, and especially throughout the 70s and 80s, are backward thinking.
Yeah, but I get it, and I actually think this is probably the best Bond does something with space story. I don't like the X-Men. I don't want James Bond to deal with space.
No, I agree with you. James Bond should not be on space.
Yeah.
James Bond should not be on the moon, and James Bond should be nowhere near any Octo-Kitties.
No.
But it's interesting because I like this movie because when he meets Tiger Tanaka, played by, I'm going to badly mispronounce his name, Tetsuro Tamba,
I don't know. Seemed like you did a pretty good job.
I think I might have nailed it. I like this because I like any James Bond movie where he meets an equal.
Yes.
That's why I like Felix.
Yep.
And Tetsuro Tamba does a really nice job
awesome.
of making Tiger seem very equal to James, especially in the first scene where he tricks James Bond.
Yes.
He gets James Bond to come into his office.
The 2 Japanese women who he has a relationship with, there's the one who he gets married to and then she dies, and then there's the one who speaks maybe 3 lines in the latter half of the movie. Those actresses were originally supposed to play the opposite roles, but one of them learned how to speak English and the other one didn't, so they wound up being swapped. And I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Now, I want to ask you a question, and then I have a theory about your opinion of this movie, besides the obvious, very bad misrepresentation. What do you think about the finale of this movie? Well, one, we got to talk about, this is the first James Bond movie that something happens in a volcano.
I don't hate it. I don't hate the volcano lair.
I also want to ask your opinion. What do you think of, because this is finally the reveal of Ernst Stavro Blofeld.
Yes.
What do you feel about Blofeld? I will tell my feelings about Blofeld after you finish.
I don't know if just because of when I was born and raised, I don't know if I was ever going to like Blofeld because I've just seen seen the parody of Blofeld 100 million times before
Dr. Evil.
I ever saw. But even before that, The Simpsons,
Simpsons does it, yes.
Every cartoon, kids' cartoons do it.
Yeah, fair point.
The villain with the cat.
Yeah.
I don't care for him. And I certainly don't like him in modern James Bond movies. Leave him dead.
Mm-hmm. Can I give you my opinion?
Sure.
Blofeld? I hate him.
It's fair.
I hate Blofeld.
He's cool in the book.
I love
cool in the book.
Spectre.
Yeah.
I hate Blofeld.
I mean, I think he should have. I think I could have gotten behind Blofeld if he'd gone away after On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and we'd never seen him again.
I'm gonna say this because this is not the George Lazenby episode.
Yeah.
I think the only movie that Blofeld works in is On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Because Telly
Savalas is so
awesome.
good.
Yeah. But that's another problem is with some of these characters. And this is also sort of the perpetual second act nature of James Bond. Some of these characters, Felix Leiter is problematic in this way too. They just keep getting recast, and you're like, I don't even know who this is anymore.
Well, yes, and I will say this: I feel a big problem with Bond movies is that Bond movies only work when the villain or a villain's henchman can fight Bond.
Yes.
Now, in this movie, there is no villain's henchman. It is only Blofeld and then just randos. Goldfinger is amazing because, yes, he doesn't fight Goldfinger, but he gets to fight Oddjob.
But Goldfinger is also his intellectual equal.
Yes. And
they tell us that Blofeld is.
But we don't see it.
Yeah.
We don't see it.
Also, Oddjob is cool as all heck.
My love of this movie, a lot of it is because, and again, it's kind of the Citizen Kane argument that a lot of people have where it's like, because it was the first to do the thing, a lot of people don't have the appreciation of it anymore. And to me,
I think that's true of Dr. No.
Yes. And I think You Only Live Twice is the same thing. Like, this is the first volcano layer. This is the first, it does a lot of things first. And because we've seen it done by a million Roger Moores and a million Pierce Brosnans, you're just like, you don't care anymore.
Yeah.
But I do have a special place in my heart. I actually do think that this is a nice goodbye for Sean Connery.
He should not have come back.
I understand. Should not have come back.
And maybe we can use this point to transition.
Yes.
Into Diamonds.
Diamonds.
Not a bad song. We also discovered this when we were watching it. Why did Sean Connery come back and take this money?
Well, I don't know off the top of my head, actually.
Well,
I just want to make sure I have my notes here.
He came back and he took a lot of money to come back for this, and he gave it all.
So let's go through this. Okay, so I just said that Sean Connery's last movie was You Only Live Twice.
It was.
So in the year is 1971, after On Her Majesty's Secret Service, starring George Lazenby as James Bond, George Lazenby was offered a contract for 7 Bond films and declined.
Thank goodness.
Now, producers went through many other actors to replace James Bond. Adam West, Burt Reynolds, Michael Gambon. And also, I want to point out that before they got to George Lazenby for On Her Majesty's Secret Service, they offered the role to a young 21-year-old Timothy Dalton, who would later on to play James Bond when he was in his 40s.
And I'm going to tease an episode that won't come out till November, or maybe later, because who knows.
Yep.
We're going to put a pin in the Timothy Dalton conversation, because we're going to talk about that later.
Yes.
But that is a cool piece of trivia.
So eventually, the United Artists chief, David Picker, was unhappy with because they eventually were like, we're going to give it to Michael Gambon. And United Artists chief David Picker was unhappy with that decision. And he was like, get Connery back. And he was like, the money is no object. So they went back to Connery. And Connery demanded a fee of £1.25 million. And to also entice the actor as part of his deal,
Please know that inflation is a thing. It's much more than that now.
United Artists offered 2 back-to-back films of his choice. And after
Intern Brago is up for that deal.
Intern Brago is all about that money. He's in the studio right now. After both sides agreed to the deal, Connery used his entire fee to establish the Scottish International Education Trust, where Scottish artists could apply for funding without having to leave their country of Scotland to pursue their careers.
What a beautiful thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
What a nice man.
Yeah.
I thought Sean Connery was kind of notoriously not a nice guy.
He might not be a nice actor to work with.
And
maybe he's bad on set.
Learning this really warms my heart. I think that's a very special thing to do.
The 2 films that he got in his deal was The Offense, directed by his friend Sidney Lumet, and the second was an adaptation of Macbeth, in which Connery would play Macbeth.
Honestly, it's a pretty good one.
But actually, that project was abandoned because Roman Polanski's version of Macbeth was already in production.
Oh, maybe that's the one I'm thinking
So there must
of.
be a different one that you have seen. Okay, so Diamonds Are Forever. Let's give you the 10-cent origin, basically, of that. Is directed by Guy Hamilton. Oh,
Hey.
Guy Hamilton.
You're still a dick.
Screenplay by Richard Maybaum. He came back. And Tom Mankiewicz, based on Diamonds Are Forever by Ian Fleming. Music by John Barry. Ted Moore came back to do the cinematography. And it was released in December of 1971. The basic plot of this is Bond impersonates a diamond smuggler to infiltrate a smuggling ring, soon uncovering a plot by his old enemy Ernst Starville Blofeld to use the diamonds to build a space-based laser weapon. And Bond has to battle his enemy for one last time to stop the smuggling and stall Blofeld's plan of destroying Washington, D.C. Now, of course, they recast Blofeld again.
Boo.
But the coolest thing about this movie, and I think I'm just going to state this, I don't like this movie.
I don't either.
I really don't like this movie. I think Connery is a little bit too old when he's playing this role. And also, the one great thing about this movie is that you get to see 1971 Las Vegas.
Old Vegas.
You get to see old Vegas. But there's a lot of problems with this. Like, there's these weirdo assassins of Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd who are just very weird. There are gangsters in this movie that make no sense.
The assassins are also weird because they're gay but not gay because it's the 70s and they're trying to be like, isn't it funny? Intern Brago is currently attacking Professor Jason.
He fell out of my hands.
Like Blofeld's cat.
Fell out of my hands.
We got to the point when we were watching this where he's in Vegas talking to the girl with the who's quite top heavy. I don't remember what her name is.
Plenty O'Toole.
And I turned to you
Named
and
after
said,
your father, of course.
I don't think I know what's happening anymore. What do you think, Brago?
What do you think, Brago? Brago's up on the mic. Intern Brago? What are your thoughts on Diamonds Are Forever? Anything? He has no thoughts. He is speechless.
It's almost time for him to be fed, so he's here begging.
Yeah, okay. I will say this. I do agree with you. Connery should never have come back. But I am glad that Connery came back and used that money. Because to be honest with you, I bet you after the previous 5, he didn't need the money.
No.
And so I'm actually kind of glad that he just gave all that money away.
Yeah.
Like 100% and used James Bond as a tool of good.
Yeah.
But old Guy Hamilton, I almost think Guy Hamilton needs to become a character on the show. I'm just saying. What do you think Guy Hamilton sounds like?
A dick.
I think it's more specific than that.
I don't like him.
My name's Guy Hamilton. I don't know why I'm Australian.
You're Sly Hamilton, Guy Hamilton.
I'm
cheaper,
Sly Hamilton right here.
Cousin
Yeah.
from Australia.
I can't wait till all Australian listeners, listen to Sly Hamilton here.
All right, tell us about production on Diamonds Are Forever.
Okay, so when I cast Plenty O'Toole, I had to make sure that her dress was just low enough for the camera, if you know what I mean. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, as we say in the film business.
Your accent is all over the place.
Is it? I'm very certain it is. Maybe Sly Hamilton should leave the show forever.
I think he should.
All right, goodbye. Would you want to be in a skimpy dress?
In a James Bond movie?
No, on this podcast. I
mean, sure, no one could see me.
I think the audio listeners need to hear how low your hemline is. They can tell.
I'm wearing a hoodie, so not that low.
Too high. You're fired.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so actually, I think you might have some other
I have a couple
discussion
just
points.
like rapid fire questions.
Yeah, okay, so there they are.
Because we've gone quite long.
Oh, you look, this is James Bond, baby. This is one of the best James Bonds ever. We're going long.
Okay. Jason.
Yes.
Best Connery Bond movie.
Goldfinger, no doubt.
Besides Goldfinger. Just because it's kind of a given.
Okay. I do think
There's no wrong answer. It's your opinion.
No. I do think it's From Russia with Love.
Cool.
I think Robert Shaw is one of the better Bond villains, and it has an interesting flavor that the other Bond movies don't have, so I think it makes it unique.
Worst Connery Bond movie.
Oh, it's Thunderball. No doubt it's Thunderball, which is so weird to me because they made the best one ever and then they made the worst one ever.
Best Connery era villain.
Ooh, this is a tough one. Connery has some good villains.
You could say a henchman too. That's fine.
Connery also has some bad villains in good movies. Oh, you know what? For my pick, I really think his best villain is Dr. No. I really do. I think Dr. No is just the most threatening. He's the most mysterious. It just sucks because you know the reason why I think he's not positively remembered is because his end fight is nothing. Like
that's fair.
His end
speechifies and that's kind of it.
He speechifies and then Connery throws him in the radiated muck and then he goes ah, and that's it. Who do you think is his best villain?
I like Lottie Lenya as
number 3.
The Russian lady's
number
name
3?
is. Yeah. She's much more of a hench person than a woman than like a
but
villain.
if you wanted to say
I like her a lot
Yeah.
as a character. Otherwise, I'd probably just say Oddjob because that fight is so good.
Oddjob is
he's
so
a wrestler,
good.
so
he's so good.
And I know it's silly and I know it's gimmicky and it's like the same thing with Jaws. Like Jaws is really silly, but I think I also like Jaws a lot. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
One of my favorite moments in all of the James Bond movies, all 25, even though I haven't seen the 25th one, is when they're golfing and Oddjob drops that ball down his leg and he goes, aha!
Yeah. Will not let him deliver a line.
But I love, in the end fight in Fort Knox and Goldfinger, the minute you know this like way earlier in the movie, but the moment, like one of the best moments in that movie is where, God, what does Bond do? But there's a moment where they cut to Oddjob and Oddjob just smiles.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, and he's just
There's
like,
a gif of it on
Twitter. And you're just like, oh my God, that is creepy as hell.
And last question.
Yes.
Best Connery era song. We can table Goldfinger because again, it's so iconic.
I do think it's Goldfinger. And to be honest with you, I'm going to say that I think Goldfinger is the Bond song to which all other Bond songs should be judged.
I agree.
Connery has a lot of good Bond songs.
I love You Only Live Twice.
From Russia with Love is a good one too. Mm-hmm. It's a really good one. Dr. No, of course, is just the James Bond theme.
Yeah, which is cool in its own right.
Hey, it's fine. Diamonds Are Forever is Shirley Bassey coming back again.
I think Diamonds Are Forever is a good song. I don't think it's a good Bond song.
No, I agree. And I would even give credit that I think Thunderball by Tom Jones is a good song, but I
disagree.
I don't know. I have to give it to You Only Live Twice because You Only Live Twice is one of the few Bond songs that I think you can play separately of Bond and it's still a good song.
I also think Nancy Sinatra is underappreciated for her brilliance.
I agree. I wish they would have brought her back for a couple more.
Oh, me too.
You know, because
she could have been a Bond girl. She was gorgeous.
Well, Shirley Bassey does 4 themes or 3 themes, and I think you could bring her back.
God, I love Shirley Bassey.
I really could. It's the same thing. It's the same argument I can make about Adele. Like Adele knocks Skyfall out of the park. Bring her back.
Yes.
Like let's do another one. Whoever
Chris Cornell should have done too. She should have done too.
Whoever does the next Bond movie, they should just bring Adele back. They should be like, give us another one.
Great.
You know,
10 out of 10.
Yeah.
All right. Shall we move into our recommended viewing?
Yeah, so recommended reading. If you go to geekhistorylesson.com/recommended reading, you go over there and you click on the widgets for this episode. Mm-hmm. And if you buy that thing through Amazon, even though it'll take over a month to ship, it will come back to the Mind University and support MI6.
Yes. Well, not support MI6. I'm going to recommend that people pick up the complete James Bond collection.
Oh!
Because why not?
It's quite expensive, just fair warning.
It is. It's a great gift, though.
I don't know if this is in your recommended reading. There is, I know, a Blu-ray set that is only the Sean Connery films.
There is.
Yes.
I'll put that in there,
okay.
too.
They did that for every Bond.
And then I was also going to just recommend if you only want to dip your toe, it's got to be Goldfinger. And you can watch Goldfinger without knowing anything else except that James Bond is James Bond and totally enjoy it.
Well, I'm going to say this. I think the great thing about almost every James Bond movie, with the exception, I would say, of some of the modern Craig ones.
The newer ones have a little more continuity.
You don't need to know jack crap about anything.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said jack crap. That's weird.
Because we're not supposed to say the other word.
You can dip into any Bond film knowing nothing.
Yeah.
And you'll be fine.
Let's move into Jason's favorite section of the podcast, the teaching tweet.
A teaching tweet is where Ashley does this outdated thing where she gives you a tweet in 140 characters.
Sean Connery, the original James Bond that everyone is copying for 50 years.
Shocking.
Yeah.
Absolutely shocking.
All right, it's honor roll time. Jason, what's the honor roll?
The honor roll is where if you go over to Apple Podcasts and you leave us a 5-star review to help bump us up in the search algorithm and let new listeners find the podcast, we will read whatever the hell you write on the show. That's right. You could insult us and we'll read it. As long as you give us 5 stars, we're going to do it.
Yeah, if you want to call me an annoying feminist, be sure to at least give us 5 stars.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy.
The first person joining the honor roll today is it's Chewbacca. Chewbacca 1. Well, there's
you're like CHEW.
Well, no, there's no vowels.
Yes.
It's CHWBC.
But it's Chewbacca.
1 is Chewbacca.
Or Chewbacca.
Who says, this was good. I've been listening to this podcast since episode 19, and I feel a connection to the host and the characters they talk about.
Oh, I feel a connection to you.
That's what I was looking for. Oh, thank you. That's so sweet.
Chewbacca.
They are also joined by David Lewis, too, who says, best comic podcast.
Oh.
I love this pod so much. It helps me get through my commute on work days. I know tons of people have already recommended Moon Knight, but I wanted to ask if you think it would be good, who you think would be good as him, and why is it Shia LaBeouf?
I almost thought you became drunk there, Vash, for a second. Maybe you had too many martinis, shaken not stirred.
Martinis are disgusting.
Yes, they are. And shaken not stirred turns it into water.
So I'm sorry, David Lewis. I know nothing about Moon Knight, so I don't know who would be good as him.
I thought he was asking about a Moon Knight episode.
He's requesting Moon Knight, and he said he wanted to ask who would be good as him, and why is it Shia LaBeouf?
It's interesting. Shia LaBeouf could be a superhero. I don't know. I find more and more, casting directors are hired for those things and they know those people, so let them do their jobs.
Yeah, unless there's someone who really obviously comes to mind. And then lastly, rounding out our honor rollees for the day is DCCNIC0722, who says, great. A lot of fun to listen to while doing homework. How young are you? And to learn more things about the comic book medium. So DCCNIC0722, David Lewis 2, and Chewbacca 1. Welcome to the Teacher's Lounge. Professor Jason, what's going on in there today?
Over in the corner is a Walter PPK. You can pick it up. You can shoot a man. Because you now all have, if you eat into the Teacher's Lounge, you now all have License to Kill.
Oh boy.
Provided by Mr. Bond.
What does he teach?
Killing.
Okay.
Actually, he teaches gentlemanly tips as learned from Guy Hamilton.
Woof.
Did all hear my name? Sly Hamilton back here.
Nope, you're cut.
Okay, boy.
All right.
Is your hemline low enough yet?
No.
Okay.
Haven't changed my clothes.
You should be lower.
No.
Okay. Okay. So don't forget to follow us on everywhere that there is a podcast. That is, you can listen to podcasts. That can be on Spotify. That can be on Apple Podcasts. That can be on Stitcher. And if you want to, leave us a 5-star review. That's really super awesome. Also, don't forget to go to our social medias at GHL Podcast on Twitter. Follow us there. And geekhistoryLesson.com/Facebook. You can follow us there. And you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at JAWIIN. You can follow Ashley on Twitter and Instagram at Ashley V. Robinson. And everyone, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/Jawiin, Jawiin. If you don't know, every single week, most weeks, we do an extra episode called Geek History Lesson Extra. It's a podcast that is exclusive to our Patreon. And this week, I'm going to leave the decision of what episode we talk about to Ashley. Ashley, we had the idea to talk about the best Bond girl of the Connery era. We already talked about best song, didn't we? Mm-hmm. Oh, damn it. I guess we're talking about best Bond girls, everybody. So come on over there, listen, patreon.com/Jawiin. Support this podcast that gives a lot of free entertainment to you. And now we're in the final period. Hashtag stick around.
By the way, Jason meant facebook.com/geekhistorylesson.
What did I say?
You said geekhistorylesson.com/Facebook.
That could work. It's late, everybody. It's late. Anyways.
If we say it, then people don't get to correct us online.
Hashtag stick around, where we make sure that you listen through the plugs this very long episode. Ashley, what are we talking about?
Jason, who is your favorite Bond and why is it Sean Connery?
Well, my favorite Bond is Sean Connery.
Yeah, I know.
It's hard to beat the original. Mm-hmm. And there is an attitude and a demeanor that Sean Connery has that is just my preference for Bond, because I do believe in sort of referencing the original material. And in the books, Bond's an assassin and he's an asshole. And Sean Connery is kind of a butt in these movies. But he's a fun. You understand why he smiles. You understand why he kills. You understand why he does certain stuff and why he treats certain women the way he does. But he loves other women when they impress the hell out of him. It's funny because I think Connery's Bond has no time for fools, no time to die, no time for fools. And he doesn't entertain them. And that's why I love when Connery gets impressed, you can tell. And I think later Bond movies and later Bonds take the gadgets and the gentleman spy thing too far. And Bond is not a gentleman spy. I always thought Bond was just like Connery. He's a poor guy who worked his way up. And as some of the more modern stuff has confirmed, that is true. It's hard. It's hard to describe. You put me on the spot, and I hope, did I explain it well enough?
I think that was great.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
Connery's the best.
There you go.
Who's your favorite Bond?
Daniel Craig.
Oh, okay. Are we going to talk about that more on the Daniel Craig episode?
Yeah.
By the way, I want to put this out here right now. We are not doing a Roger Moore episode. Just saying that right now. We're not. I am not rewatching A View to a Kill. I'm not doing it.
It's got Grace Jones in it, though.
I'm not doing it. It also has Christopher Walken. And I'm not rewatching Moonraker. You can forget it right now. So we're not doing Roger Moore.
If you want to...
Nope.
Come on and teach the Roger Moore
episode,
yeah. Or lead the discussion. If there is someone out there who feels very passionately about Roger Moore, and both of us do like him.
I love The Man with the Golden Gun. I love The Spy Who Loved Me.
We don't feel confident doing the lesson on our own. Hit us up, man. Lady.
For me, and I'm looking forward to all the hate tweets on this one. I don't enjoy the Roger Moore era of Bond. I really don't.
I don't either, but I don't think I don't put that on him.
Oh, no. But part of the reason why I don't like the era is his portrayal of Bond. And I know I said earlier I didn't want to get into a Bond.
Yeah.
But I will say, I do think,
I'll say this, I don't think he's the worst Bond.
Oh, I think he is.
I don't.
I do. I think he is. But I will say, I think he's great in Live or Let Die. Yeah. I think he's great in The Man with the Golden Gun. I think he's great in The Spy Who Loved Me. He does a really good job. And to be honest with you, I understand why they almost gave him the part.
I'll say this, and I said a little bit
before Connery.
Something like this a little bit earlier. The most interesting thing about going and watching them like this is I don't think any of them are actually bad.
No, I agree.
You can really see what in the actors casting was looking for and why they picked that person at that time. It's just a matter of taste. And so I would never, even if you picked a person that I think is the least good, I wouldn't hold it against you. I wouldn't judge anyone for who their favorite Bond is.
That is true. I do agree with that. Every Bond actor, everybody they've cast for Bond is great.
Yeah.
Has been really good.
And has brought something interesting.
And they all have something different, which I think is also good.
Yeah.
But yeah, there you go. But Sean Connery's the best. Let's be honest. Sean Connery's the best. Let's say about this. I think, have we talked about this before on this podcast? Which Bond do you think could beat the other Bonds, or should that be the extra?
I mean, that could be the extra.
You want to make that the extra?
Sure.
Let's make that the extra. You got to hear that on patreon.com/Jawiin. Which James Bond?
I know exactly who I would pick.
Could beat the other James Bond? Because remember when we
got to set rules then, because it's like, are they at the height of their powers? Are they as they are right now? Because Sean Connery's gonna pass away.
You will hear us create these rules live on patreon.com/Jawiin. It'll be very similar because we did an episode like this for Doctor Who.
Yes.
Where it was like, which doctor could beat the other doctors? And I'll be honest with you, I will be very objective. And yes, we will create the rules live and stuff like that. So patreon.com/Jawiin if you want to hear which James Bond could beat the extra Bonds. I love it. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Geek History Lesson. I'm Inman, Jason Inman.
And I'm the lady who adopts cats. Professor Inman.
Kitty Galore.
I'm Kitty Galore. Can you please, if you draw me holding a bunch of cats
as Kitty
Galore and Jason as James Bond, I'll send you something. Professor Jason, would you please dismiss the class?
Class is dismissed.